No one noticed the small cleaning girl in the corner of the boardroom at the top of the Nakamura Tower in Tokyo, but when those words left her lips, the golden pen stopped inches from the paper, and the most powerful man in Japan realized that everything he'd built was about to be stolen. What this orphaned child had discovered in the shadows would expose a betrayal that went deeper than anyone imagined, and the woman he trusted most was the architect of his destruction. It was a humid July evening in Tokyo, when 12-year-old Yuki Tanaka pushed her cleaning cart through the marble corridors of Nakamura Tower, the gleaming 70-story headquarters of Nakamura Industries. Her uniform was too big, hanging loosely on her thin frame, and her hands were rough from scrubbing floors since she was 10 years old. Yuki had been an orphan since she was 8, when the tsunami took her parents and left her alone in a country that had little patience for children with no family. She'd been lucky in a way. The cleaning company had hired her under the table, paying her a fraction of minimum wage, but giving her enough to rent a tiny room in a boarding house and eat once a day. It wasn't much of a life, but it was survival. And Yuki had learned that survival meant being invisible, keeping your head down and never, ever drawing attention to yourself. Tonight was special. The building was nearly empty except for the top floor, where Hiroshi Nakamura himself was working late. At 72 years old, he was one of the wealthiest men in Asia, having built an empire from nothing after World War II. His company touched everything: electronics, automobiles, real estate, pharmaceuticals. His personal fortune was estimated at over $30 billion. Yuki had seen him a few times from a distance. He was small, elegant, always dressed impeccably in custom suits. He had kind eyes, she thought, which was rare among the executives she cleaned for. Most of them looked through her like she was furniture. She was supposed to clean the executive floor tonight, but her supervisor had warned her to stay out of the main conference room. Mr. Nakamura was having an important meeting with his family and lawyers, something about succession planning. But Yuki had learned long ago that being invisible had advantages. She could move through spaces unnoticed, hear conversations people thought were private. It wasn't eavesdropping exactly. People just forgot she existed. She was dusting a decorative plant outside the conference room when she heard raised voices. Not angry, but intense, passionate. She shouldn't listen, should move away. But something made her pause. "Father, you know this is for the best." A woman's voice, smooth and persuasive. Yuki recognized it. Akiko Nakamura, the billionaire's daughter from his second marriage. She was 45, beautiful, educated at Harvard Business School. She'd been groomed to take over the company for the past decade. "I know, Akiko, but signing over complete control while I'm still alive." Hiroshi's voice was uncertain. "Are you sure this is necessary? Father, you're 72 years old. You've had 2 heart attacks. The board is concerned about succession uncertainty. If something happens to you suddenly, the company could face chaos. Stock prices could crash. Hostile takeovers could happen." Akiko's voice was patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "If you transfer control now, in an organized way, the transition is smooth. You can retire peacefully, enjoy your remaining years, and know the company is in good hands. But complete control? Why not just majority voting rights? Because half measures create confusion, Father. The board needs to know there's one clear leader. Trust me, I've spent my entire life preparing for this. I love this company as much as you do." Yuki heard papers rustling. Through a crack in the door, she could see into the conference room. Hiroshi sat at the head of a long table, looking small and tired. Akiko stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, in what looked like a loving gesture. Around the table sat lawyers in expensive suits, a notary, and a few other executives Yuki didn't recognize. "The documents are all prepared, Nakamura-san," one of the lawyers said. "Everything is legal and proper. You'll retain a generous annual stipend of 50 million yen, a residence of your choosing, and full medical care for life. But operational control of Nakamura Industries transfers entirely to Akiko-san." "And my son?" Hiroshi asked. "Takeshi should have some role." Yuki saw Akiko's face tighten slightly. "Takeshi has no interest in the business, Father. You know that. He's in Kyoto playing with his pottery and his art. He signed away his inheritance claims years ago. Still, he's my son." My firstborn. From your first marriage. To a woman who divorced you and took half your fortune. Akiko's voice had an edge now. Father, I've been loyal. I've dedicated my life to this company. Takeshi abandoned you for his bohemian lifestyle. Why are you hesitating? Hiroshi looked down at the documents. Pages and pages of legal text, probably incomprehensible even to him. You're right, of course, I'm just being sentimental. It's understandable. This is a big moment, but it's the right thing to do. Yuki watched as Akiko placed a golden fountain pen in her father's hand. The same pen he'd used to sign the papers when he'd taken the company public 40 years ago. A symbol of legacy. Something felt wrong to Yuki. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way Akiko's face had changed when Hiroshi mentioned his son. Maybe it was the way the lawyers all sat very still, like they were holding their breath. Maybe it was just instinct, honed by years of watching people to figure out who was safe and who was dangerous. She looked more carefully at the scene, and that's when she noticed something odd. On the table near Akiko was a second set of documents, identical leather folder, identical thickness, but slightly different color tab. Yuki's eyes were sharp from years of spotting valuable items people threw away that she could sell. She knew when things didn't match, and then she saw it. When the lawyers weren't looking, when Hiroshi was distracted reading the first page of the document in front of him, Akiko made a subtle gesture to one of the lawyers. The man nodded almost imperceptibly and slid a document from the second folder over the document Hiroshi was about to sign. A switch, so smooth, so practiced, that if you weren't watching specifically for it, you'd never see it. Yuki's heart started pounding. She didn't know exactly what was happening, but she knew it was wrong, knew it was a trick, and she knew that if she said nothing, something terrible would happen to the kind old man who'd never been cruel to her in the few times their paths had crossed. But what could she do? She was nobody. A poor orphan girl who cleaned toilets and scrubbed floors. Who would listen to her? Hiroshi picked up the golden pen, brought it toward the paper. Akiko's face was perfectly composed, but Yuki could see the anticipation in her eyes. The triumph. Yuki didn't think. She just moved, pushed open the conference room door and stepped inside, her cleaning cart forgotten behind her. "Sir, don't sign it." Her voice came out louder than she intended, echoing in the large room. "She's tricking you." Everyone turned to stare. Hiroshi froze, the pen hovering over the signature line. Akiko's face went from composed to furious in an instant. "Who is this child? Security, get her out of here." But Hiroshi held up his hand, the same way he'd done in 1,000 board meetings when he wanted silence. "Wait, what did you say, girl?" Yuki's legs were shaking, but she stepped forward. "The documents, sir, she switched them. There are 2 sets, the one you were reading and the one you're about to sign. They're different." "That's absurd," Akiko snapped. "Father, this child is clearly disturbed. She's just a cleaning girl. She doesn't understand business documents." "Then there's no harm in checking," Hiroshi said quietly. He looked at the document in front of him, then at his daughter. "Akiko, where is the document I was reading a moment ago?" "This is ridiculous. Show me." Something in Hiroshi's voice made it clear this wasn't a request. For all his age and apparent frailty, this was a man who'd built an empire through will and intelligence. He wasn't senile yet. Akiko's perfectly made-up face twitched. "I don't know what this child thinks she saw, but Tanaka-san." Hiroshi addressed one of the lawyers, a nervous-looking man in his 50s. "Give me the folder to your left." The lawyer hesitated, glanced at Akiko, then slowly passed over the second folder. Hiroshi opened it and compared the documents. His face went pale, then red with anger. "These are not the same," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "The document I was about to sign, it's not just a transfer of operational control. It's a complete transfer of all assets, all voting rights, all property rights. It even includes a clause that puts me under a conservatorship if I'm deemed mentally incompetent by a doctor of the conservator's choosing." He looked at his daughter with devastation in his eyes. "You were going to take everything, not just the company, everything." The room was silent. Akiko's composure had completely shattered. "Father, it's not what you think. Those are just backup documents in case..." "In case what?" In case I was foolish enough to sign away my entire life without reading carefully? Were you banking on my age, my tiredness, my trust in you? You don't understand the pressures I'm under. The board, the shareholders, they all question whether a woman can lead this company. I needed absolute control to prove myself. So you were going to steal it from your own father? Hiroshi's voice broke. Were you planning to have me declared incompetent after I signed? Lock me away somewhere while you spent my fortune? Akiko said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Hiroshi turned to Yuki, who was still standing there, terrified and unsure if she'd done the right thing. What is your name, child? Yuki Tanaka, sir. How old are you, Yuki? 12, sir. And how did you notice the switch? These are experienced lawyers, business people. No one else saw it. I watch people, sir. When you're poor, you learn to see things, to notice when something is wrong. I saw her make a gesture and the lawyer switched the papers. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but I knew it was deceptive. Hiroshi stood up slowly, with the dignity of a man who'd just been betrayed by his own blood, but refused to let it break him. Gentlemen, this meeting is over. These documents are void. Akiko, you are removed from all positions in Nakamura Industries, effective immediately. Father, you can't. I can and I will. I built this company from nothing. I survived war, poverty, betrayal. I rebuilt Japan's economy with my bare hands, and I will not let my own daughter destroy what I've built. He turned to his head of security, who'd just arrived at the commotion. Escort Akiko from the building. She is not to return without my express permission. As security moved toward her, Akiko's face transformed. The loving daughter mask was completely gone, replaced by cold fury. You're making a mistake, old man. I'm the only one who can run this company. Without me, it will crumble. Perhaps, but at least it will crumble honestly, not through fraud and deception. Get her out of my sight. As Akiko was escorted out, still protesting, still threatening, Hiroshi sank back into his chair. He suddenly looked every day of his 72 years. The lawyers and executives quickly excused themselves, leaving Hiroshi alone with Yuki. Thank you, he said quietly. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. I couldn't stay quiet, sir. It wasn't right. Most people would have. Most people would have thought it wasn't their business, or that they had no right to interfere. But you spoke up, at great risk to yourself. He studied her carefully. You're an orphan, aren't you? I can see it. The way you stand, ready to run. The way you expect to be dismissed or ignored. Yuki nodded, surprised he could see so much. Yes, sir. And yet you showed more loyalty to a stranger than my own daughter showed to me. Hiroshi was quiet for a long moment. Tell me, Yuki, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? Yuki thought about lying, saying something modest and appropriate, but this man had just been lied to enough for one lifetime. An education, sir. I want to go to school. Real school, not just the charity classes for poor kids. I want to learn to be something more than a cleaning girl. Then that's what you'll have. I'm going to make arrangements for you tonight. Boarding school, the best in Japan, university, whichever one you choose. And after that, if you prove yourself, a position in my company. Sir, that's too much. It's not enough. You saved my life tonight, Yuki. Not just my money or my company, but my dignity, my legacy. That's worth more than any amount I could pay you. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Sato-san, it's Hiroshi. I need you to come to the tower immediately. I'm making changes to my will. Significant changes. Over the next hour, Yuki sat in the corner of the conference room, still not quite believing what was happening, as Hiroshi met with a different set of lawyers. These ones, he explained, were from a firm that had served his father, lawyers he'd known for decades. Lawyers he could actually trust. He dictated changes to his will, his succession plans. He created a trust for Yuki's education and future, and he made arrangements to investigate every business decision Akiko had made in the past 5 years, looking for other deceptions. When it was done, when the lawyers had left with their instructions, Hiroshi turned to Yuki. You should go home. It's late. But tomorrow, come see me. We have much to discuss about your future. Sir, I have one question, Yuki said hesitantly. Your son, Takeshi, the one your daughter said abandoned you, is that true? Hiroshi's face softened sadly. No. Takeshi and I had a disagreement years ago about the direction of the company. He wanted to pursue art instead of business. I was angry, said things I regret. He moved to Kyoto, and Akiko encouraged me to cut contact with him, said he was just after my money. I believed her. But now, he trailed off. Now I wonder how much of our estrangement was her manipulation. If she could trick me tonight, what else has she lied about over the years? Maybe you should call him, sir. Hiroshi looked at this 12-year-old girl who'd shown more wisdom than his entire board of directors and smiled. Maybe I should. Yuki left the tower that night with her head spinning. She took the last train back to her boarding house, changed out of her cleaning uniform, and lay on her thin mattress staring at the ceiling. Her life had just changed in ways she couldn't fully process. Tomorrow, she'd be going to boarding school. Eventually, university. She'd have opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. But something nagged at her. The same instinct that had made her notice the document switch was bothering her now. Akiko's reaction had been wrong, too theatrical. Too much outrage and not enough surprise. It was like she'd expected to be caught, or at least had a backup plan. And there was something else. When security had escorted Akiko out, Yuki had seen her face one more time. Not angry anymore, not scared, but calculating. Like someone who'd just lost a battle but not the war. Yuki sat up. What if the document switch wasn't the real plan? What if it was meant to be discovered, but why? What would Akiko gain from being caught red-handed trying to steal from her father? Unless the point wasn't to succeed, the point was to be caught, to be publicly betrayed and disowned. Because that created something else. Sympathy, narrative, motive. Yuki's blood ran cold. What if tonight wasn't about stealing Hiroshi's fortune while he was alive? What if it was about setting up a justification for something worse? She thought about the conversation she'd overheard. Akiko mentioning Hiroshi's heart attacks, his age, the concern about sudden death. What if Akiko had been planning something more permanent? And the document fraud was just theater, to establish her as the wronged party when her father suddenly died of natural causes. Yuki grabbed her phone, the cheap prepaid one she used for emergencies. She had Hiroshi's card now, the one he'd given her with instructions to call his assistant tomorrow. But tomorrow might be too late. She dialed the number. It rang 4 times. 5. She was about to hang up when a tired voice answered. Moshi Moshi. Nakamura-san, this is Yuki. I'm sorry to call so late, but I think you're still in danger. I think tonight was just the beginning of your daughter's plan, not the end. There was silence on the other end. Then Hiroshi's voice, suddenly alert and focused. Tell me everything. And Yuki did. Explained her instincts about Akiko's reaction, about how being caught might have been part of the plan all along, about how a public betrayal would make Akiko look like a victim if her father suddenly died. When she finished, Hiroshi was quiet for a long moment. You think she's planning to kill me? I think she might have already started, sir. The heart attacks you mentioned. When did they start? 2 years ago. Right after I announced I was considering Takeshi for a role in the company again. And who was managing your medications after that? Another long silence. Akiko insisted on hiring my medical staff. She said she wanted to make sure I had the best care. My doctor, my nurses, even my nutritionist, all hired by her. Sir, you need to get away from anyone she hired. Tonight. Right now. Hiroshi must have heard the urgency in her voice because she heard movement on the other end of the line. I'm in my private residence now. My regular bodyguard is Sato. He's been with me for 20 years. I trust him. But the night nurse, send her away. Don't let her give you anything. Already done. Yuki, how does a 12-year-old girl understand all this? When you have nothing, sir, you learn to see how people with everything try to get more, and I've seen enough cruelty to recognize it in all its forms. I'm calling the police and my private investigators. If Akiko has been poisoning me, if my medical staff is compromised, I want evidence. Sir, one more thing. Your son, call him. Tonight. Because if something does happen to you, he needs to know the truth about his sister. After Yuki hung up, she couldn't sleep. She'd done everything she could, but worry gnawed at her. Akiko was smart, connected, and ruthless. Even with warnings, Even with precautions, could they really stop her? What Yuki couldn't know yet, was that her instincts were even more accurate than she'd feared, and the conspiracy she'd uncovered was deeper and more dangerous than anyone imagined. Because Akiko Nakamura wasn't working alone.